I'm Lisa Van Dusen, and I'm here with Elton Sherwin, who is co-founder and executive director of Carbon Zero Institute. And they have just launched the Gigaton Gifts website, which sells products that works to make the planet carbon zero by mid-century. And it's a pleasure to have this conversation today. I'm actually on the board of Carbon Zero Institute, so it's a chance for me to both learn more about you, Elton, what your evolution has been, as well as share some of what you've been doing with more people.
Well, it's great to have you here.
Elton, how did you get to this point? You obviously have had a lot of different experiences.
Well, I was fascinated with computers, and my father had sold the first computer in the state of California when he worked for IBM. And I went east to Amherst, and they considered computer programming and software engineering something in a trade school that shouldn't be taught in a true liberal education. So I came back out to Berkeley, studied political science and computer programming, and that computer programming experience was really what got me into the tech industry.
But you were a political science major, so that's
Yes.
an interesting combination.
It was.
Is there any way that you think that political science flavoring, or actually really focus, influenced the way that you approached computer science and programming?
Well, it did, because we didn't call it big data then. But when I arrived at Berkeley the first day, the political science professor stood up and said, "This is a political science class. We believe in measuring things. If you can't measure it, it doesn't belong in political science. It belongs in philosophy or history." So Berkeley had a very quantitative, very big data focus, very analytic focus on political science.
Did you go straight to the East Coast after graduating?
No, I worked for IBM both here, and then my wife and I got engaged. We met in an IBM class, and she said, "I'll live anywhere in the country," because she was on the East Coast, "other than LA and New York." And IBM promptly moved us to LA and to New York, and which we enjoyed.
Yeah.
And then when our eldest got to a point where she had to be in schools, we came back out here to Silicon Valley.
Fast forward, you came out and worked at that point at Motorola.
Yes.
And
they hired me away from IBM.
Hired you away from IBM. And talk about your sort of approach to being in Silicon Valley. Those are somewhat early days. Mm-hmm. And what was your lens? I mean, you ended up writing The Silicon Valley Way, publishing in 1998. Can you talk
Yes.
about that?
Well, the original lens was it's really all about the product. So it was very much a product manager, engineer's view of the world. Is it cool enough? Can you build it at what price? And that continues, I think, to be a major focus in Silicon Valley. I think now there's more of a how do you market it, how do you merchandise it, more of a focus on perhaps the cool factor than there was in the early days.
It seems like what you did is essentially reverse engineered Silicon Valley, really looked at what was the secret sauce, how did it work, what was the Silicon Valley Way.
Right. I interviewed a lot of people and tried to put together the essence of what had made their business or their product successful. And the book has been very popular around the world. It's used in universities and colleges.
Well, how did that book come to be? Like, what made you want to write that book?
Well, we were at that golden time in our making of our family where the kids went to bed at 8, and we had a couple of hours every evening of quiet. And so I was working on 2 books, and I turned to my wife one night and said, "I can't write 2 books. Which one should I write?" She says, "Do the business book." So that's how it came to be.
So you published that book, and at that point you also made a transition right around that time.
Yes. Yes. So Motorola decided to open a venture capital office in Silicon Valley, and I was sort of the logical candidate to do that because I'd researched it and I'd written about it. So I moved over and went to work for Motorola Ventures.
But you were logical because of the book, not because of what you've been doing.
That's true, because I'd just come off of interviewing everyone that I could possibly interview, and trying to identify what's the essence of this venture, this wealth creation machine that we have in the Valley.
Meanwhile, Ridgewood Capital, an East Coast-based, New Jersey-based firm, had a focus on oil and gas exploration. Mm-hmm. And if we fast forward to what you're interested in now, it's pretty interesting contrast.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the transition for you that really, there was some kind of epiphany that happened? I mean, you started doing clean tech investing and then ultimately wrote Addicted to Energy. So was that a slow evolution for you in Ridgewood, or was there some kind of switch that flipped?
Well, the switch that flipped was we built a home in Menlo Park that was over the top in compliance with the latest California energy efficiency standards. And we then proceeded to get a bill from PG&E, just the electric piece of the bill. PG&E does both gas and electric, but the electric piece was over $500, and we were in shock.
So when was this, just to put it in context?
This was in the early 2000s, and so started trying to go, how can you build a structure that's in compliance with one of the strictest building codes in the world and end up with it was the same family, we were doing sort of the same things. And so it was going through reverse engineering that, really understanding what creates energy usage in a building, the carbon footprint, and that resulted in Addicted to Energy, which is kind of 70 things that families and local communities can do. The term now that's used is subnational policy, those things that don't require international agreements that you can do that really reduce consumption and the carbon footprint. And it really all started with the shock of looking at a significantly bigger energy bill and not a smaller one, and trying to figure out what the builder had done and what we had done.
How did that relate, if it did, to the clean tech practice at Ridgewood?
Well, that's what got me interested and got me up the learning curve, because I spent several years researching that, talking to people and really understanding building energy consumption and how that intertwines with policy.
So it was your personal experience?
Personal experience that started it. If I'd had a $75 PG&E bill that month, I might never have gone down that road.
What is your quick definition of the climate change problem?
So we're burning too much stuff. So when you look at what's causing the planet to heat up, and we've just gotten to a point now where over the mainland of the U.S., we probably aren't going to be able to hold the warming to 7 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a fairly significant milestone to have crossed.
7 degrees over where we are now. In other words, the temperature is going to go up 7 degrees Fahrenheit over land from where it is.
Yes, and that is not 7 degrees just on the hottest days of July and August in the afternoon. That's an average. So the middle of the night, the morning, the winter, the summer, the fall, we're going to see the entire thing go up about 7 degrees if we get our act together quickly. But we've kind of lost the window without engaging in some kind of climate engineering or geoengineering to hold it to 7 degrees. You
now have left Ridgewood. You're not, and clean tech kind of left, not entirely, but a lot, right?
Right.
So you were faced with a new opportunity to do something with your life. It was your energy bill, the financial part, that got you triggered to start exploring this. What's motivating you now?
Well, I got really troubled by what we were hearing from the scientists, particularly at Stanford, but really all over the world, about what's going on from the burning of coal and oil and gas and what it's doing to the planet. You
decided to start the Carbon Zero Institute. You're the founder and the co-founder.
Yeah.
So how did you come up with that idea? And tell us what it is.
Well, it was really a group of us that were discussing what to do. And so ended up co-founding it, looked at a number of opportunities, and my kids were really the ones that said, this climate change thing, you know more about it than almost anyone, which is not really true. But in terms of the intersection of business economics, public policy, and climate science, I really do have an expertise there. And so they were the ones that really pushed me to focus on this.
So it sounds like you've landed right now on Gigaton Gifts, a
Yes.
website that you've launched. Talk about that.
Our first major project for the holidays is called Gigaton Gifts. You can buy 25 trees in Ethiopia for $6 or 50 mangrove trees in Madagascar for $9. So it's a way to donate and give a gift and do something that's climate positive instead of buying something that has a big carbon footprint and then giving it to someone who's going to put it in their garage or give it away at Goodwill.
Tell me about the basic premise of Carbon Zero Institute. Again, I serve on that board, so I know about it.
Right. So we look for gigaton scale projects, big projects where a small little institute can be the catalyst to make something happen.
And what's the funding structure of that?
It's all done by donations.
And,
it's underfunded.
Yeah. And how did you decide to start with Gigaton Gifts?
Amongst the volunteers, it was the most popular thing. And a piece of it is it was quick, it was something they could relate to, something they could talk to their friends about it. So we looked at 5 or 6 projects. Several of them went out years into the future. And this one is something we could get done in half a year, and people wanted to do it. And so it seemed like a good first project.
And it's not just buying trees to be planted, but it's also solar stoves.
Solar stoves, yes. So there's an intertwining between people needing wood to cook. They cut down the forests. Then you get erosion. They can't feed themselves. More wood gets cut down, and you create really both an environmental and economic disaster. So to solve that, you've got to do multiple things. One is plant trees, figure out how to keep people from cutting them down, and you have to reduce the need for wood and charcoal to cook food. And so high efficiency stoves and solar stoves dramatically reduce the pressure on the forest.
And it sounds like the stoves are communal stoves. So it's like people going to the well for water. They go to a really big stove, solar stove.
We do both. And every country is different. Our partner in Madagascar has 10 different stoves. Several of them are almost always used in community, and then several of them are private. And many families do both. So when it's sunny out, they like to use the really big solar stoves. They get very hot. They can cook the rice in 20 minutes. They can boil the water in 10 minutes or less. So on sunny days...
How big are these?
Well, they're bigger in diameter than most large screen TVs. So they're 50-inch diameter. They're big. And if you roll up a group of newspapers and put it in front, it'll light it on fire in a couple of seconds. So they're very hot. You can cook almost anything on it that you could in a normal stove. On cloudy days or at night, you need another solution. Obviously, it's not sunny. So we also have 2 small high efficiency stoves, one that works on propane and one that burns wood and charcoal.
So why would you want to use charcoal?
Well, it might be what's available.
So it's backup so that they can completely be on stoves as opposed to open fires.
Right. So a good high efficiency stove uses half as much fuel as putting 3 rocks together and cooking something over it, which is still how it's done by 1 billion or 1.5 billion people. And
I know there are a lot of health benefits, people not breathing that. I mean, there are many co-benefits, but again, your motivation was to get us, the planet, to carbon zero by mid-century. Right, and deforestation and smoke are major contributors to global warming. What I didn't realize when we started down was the damage that the smoke also did to health. And so tens of millions of people end up injured by breathing the smoke. Several million women and children die. And so that's been a pleasant kind of co-benefit to worrying about the environmental issues. So if you ruled the world and you could fund any project to get us to carbon zero by mid-century, what would that project be? Well, so the question sort of assumes there's a single silver bullet. And when you look at it, what you really discover is that there are several dozen things that need to be done. But clearly, the thing that would be most helpful
would be a gradually increasing price of carbon. British Columbia probably has one of the most nuanced systems of doing this. They tax carbon pollution, and then they divvy all the money that they raise up and they send it back to families as checks. And that system, there are a lot of advocates for doing it that way. It's one of several competing approaches, but I think if you had 10 seconds to pick one method, that would certainly be high on the list because it motivates all the right behaviors.
Thank you.
Thank you.